Hello students, welcome to Philobytes. In this video, we are going to get acquainted with 5 core ideas in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. And these 5 essential ideas in his philosophy are very important if you are a student, a beginner in the subject philosophy. So let's begin. Before we get into the 5 core ideas, here are some important books written by Kant for philosophy graduates. Immanuel Kant wrote 3 major volumes, all of which are entitled Critics: The Critic of Pure Reason, The Critic of Practical Reason, and The Critic of Judgment. These works form the backbone of Kant's philosophical system and explore different areas of knowledge and morality. The Critic of Pure Reason. This book focuses on epistemology and aims to define the limits and possibilities of human knowledge. Kant explores the nature of our mental faculties and argues that knowledge is shaped by the interaction between our senses and our understanding. He introduces the distinction between phenomena and noumena, highlighting the unknowable reality that exists independently. Kant also addresses the problem of how we can obtain necessary and universal truths from contingent and particular experiences, proposing the role of categories in organizing our understanding of the world. The Critic of Practical Reason. In this work, Kant delves into ethics and moral philosophy. He argues for the centrality of reason in moral decision-making and rejects an emphasis on consequences. Kant is a deontologist, meaning he believes in the moral worth of an action lies in the motive behind it rather than its outcomes. He contends that immorality is a form of irrationality and that reason is the source of morality. Kant's ethical theory is based on the concept of autonomy and the formation of maxims dictated by reason. The Critic of Judgment. This book explores aesthetics, the philosophy of art and beauty, and teleology, that is, the study of purposes in nature. Kant investigates the nature of aesthetic judgments and argues that judgments of beauty are subjective but universal. He also examines the concept of teleological judgment, considering how we perceive order and purpose in nature. Kant suggests that while we cannot prove the existence of a final purpose in nature, our minds are naturally inclined to seek patterns and purposes in the natural world. These 3 critics represent Kant's systematic approach to philosophy, covering epistemology, ethics, aesthetics, and teleology. Through his critical method, Kant aims to examine the limits of knowledge, understand the principles of morality, and explore the subjective experience of beauty. The next book is Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. This is the introduction to Kant's moral philosophy. It is written in a simple tone and it's a great start before you take on the rest of Kant's theory and his philosophy books. And the last one I need to mention here is the groundwork for the metaphysics of morals. The goal of the groundwork is to work out a pure moral philosophy free from all empirical grounding. It elucidates how acting out of the respect for the categorical imperative and in conformity with it is the only route to acting rationally and autonomously. Autonomy means freedom in the sense of being self-determined. Now, the first core concept, philosophy as critique. Kant's philosophy focuses on applying a critical method to philosophical problems rather than speculating on the nature of the world. He argues for a shift from metaphysics to epistemology, emphasizing the importance of understanding what we can know and how our mental faculties shape our perception of reality. The fundamental idea of Kant's critical philosophy, especially in his three critiques, critique of pure reason, the critique of practical reason, and the critique of the power of judgment, is human autonomy. The second core concept, transcendental idealism. Kant distinguishes between phenomena, which are appearances constructed by our minds, and noumena, the unknowable reality that exists independently. He argues that our knowledge is limited to the realm of phenomena, as our mental faculties shape our experience, and we can never directly access the noumenal reality. Kant's transcendental idealism highlights the active role of the mind in shaping our perception of reality. In the chapter of phenomena and noumena, Kant discusses extensively the transcendental idealist implications of his account and once again draws attention to the fact that the domain of application of the categories is the domain of appearances and not the things in themselves. Core concept number three, synthetic a priori knowledge. Kant addresses the problem of how we can obtain necessary and universal truths from contingent and particular experiences. He proposes that our mental faculties organize experience according to certain categories, which become necessary and universal features of our understanding. This concept of synthetic a priori knowledge explains how we can have substantive knowledge about the world despite the limitations of our experience. In his critique of pure reason, Kant used these distinctions in part to explain the special case of mathematical knowledge, which he regarded as the fundamental example of a priori knowledge. Core concept number four, deontological ethics. Kant's ethical framework is deontological, focusing on the motive behind the actions rather than their consequences. He argues that reason is the source of morality and that immoral actions violate the principles dictated by reason. Moral judgment should be directed at the reasons for our actions as we are able to deliberate and give reasons for our choices. Kant believes that to act immorally is to act irrationally and compromise our humanity. Modern deontological theory was introduced by Kant through his account of the categorical imperative. For Kant, categorical imperatives are those commands that you must follow irrespective of what your desires are. It is so because moral obligations are derived from human intellect or practical reason. Kant's main work in ethics are his Metaphysics of Morals and the groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals. Neither give practical advice about particular situations, but rather through rational reflection, Kant seeks to establish the supreme principle of morality. In the groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, Kant introduces the ultimate moral maxim, the way of evaluating motivations for action. It is best known in its original formulation, that is, the maxim is this: act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Core concept number 5, the ethics of autonomy. Kant emphasizes that reason defines what is good and bad, and behaving rationally is essential for autonomous human beings. He argues that acting in accordance with reason and moral principles allow us to prove to ourselves that we are autonomous beings in control of our passions and appetites. Immorality is seen as a form of irrationality, and by acting immorally, we diminish ourselves as rational human beings. We have finally arrived at the definition of morality. Necessity for any action must be grounded in reason, for moral reason alone can legislate that universal law which imposes practical necessity. Autonomy is the only condition by which reason determines its own universal law, which law in turn makes an action objectively necessary, that is, obligatory. Consequently, we may define morality as the relationship of the self-legislating will to an action perceived as objectively necessary through its own self-legislation. Kant shows that the moral law, as expressed by the categorical imperative, does not prescribe specific positive duties. Any action is morally permissible and is consistent with an autonomous will, that is, which is not in conflict with it. Thus, I may indeed eat an ice cream, dance, cheer at a football game, and ride a bicycle, unless any of these actions conflict with some duty. So, viewers, that is all for now. I'll be back with important questions on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, and I will provide short answers to the questions. I hope you join me then. Thank you and bye bye.